If you ever hear this music, no, not that. I mean, this music, you know you're in for a bad time because the Bikini Bottom Police Department just showed up. But actually, you might be okay because the police of Bikini Bottom ain't too bright. In fact, the Bikini Bottom Police Department is out of control. They constantly harass the citizens of the town with petty tickets for minor violations, while allowing the real criminals of Bikini Bottom to go unpunished even in the face of overwhelming evidence. Today, I'm going to expose Bikini Bottom's police force for every instance of corruption, ineptitude, and downright laziness they exhibit throughout the show. The first time we see a cop in Bikini Bottom comes in the episode Hall Monitor, with this famous scene of two cops trolling Patrick while on patrol as they are looking for Spongebob, aka the Maniac.
Horrible!
While this interaction is certainly hilarious, nothing egregious happens here. You could argue that the cops should have been more kind to Patrick, but other than that, it was a pretty normal interaction. Things would change by the end of the episode, though. When SpongeBob realizes he's the maniac, he is suddenly surrounded by cops, and he is presumably about to be arrested, but then Mrs. Puff shows up, saying he is her responsibility. And just like that, the police arrest her instead and let SpongeBob go free. I'm not really sure if this classifies as laziness or ineptitude more, but surely Mrs. Puff giving SpongeBob a hall monitor outfit for school shouldn't make her responsible for his crimes. At the very worst, she could be considered an accessory, but if that was the case, both her and SpongeBob would have been arrested. But honestly, this is still a fairly minor offense by Bikini Bottom police standards. There are far worse violations that I will get to later in the video. But for now, I'm going to keep talking about Mrs. Puff's interactions with the police because there's kind of a lot of them. For example, the Season 8 episode Oral Report is very different from Hall Monitor, but has a very similar conclusion. SpongeBob steals Mrs. Puff's boat and then runs a stop sign before crashing through a bunch of buildings before the cops finally catch up with him. But once again, SpongeBob gets away with it as Mrs. Puff admits that he is her student. At least in this case, the cop cites a law that states that the boating instructor is responsible for any minor delinquent actions under the teacher's care. So technically, the cops were in the right this time. And this could also explain why SpongeBob got away with his shenanigans in Hall Monitor too. And it also explains why she was arrested in the Season 3 episode Doing Time after SpongeBob crashed into a tanker truck outside Shady Shoals. Regardless of what the law says, though, police are meant to protect and serve their communities. Clearly, the police of Bikini Bottom continue to put the town in danger by not punishing SpongeBob for his actions. So I think we can file this one under negligence. Mrs. Puff's criminal record is far more extensive than this, though. To be fair, some of her arrests have been warranted, like in the episode Ditchin'. She is arrested for ditching jury duty, or in Bumper to Bumper, she is arrested for violating her parole, which is actually just the cops being competent for once. That being said, perhaps the most egregious instance of Mrs. Puff being wrongfully arrested comes in the episode Patrick Man. In this one, she is trying to help a student get out of a car that he is locked into, but the police think that she is trying to steal it just because Patrick says so. So without asking any questions, they take her away. Bikini Bottom cops. They ain't that smart. Mrs. Puff's criminal record is rather extensive, but this video isn't really about that, so let's take a look at some other questionable moments from Bikini Bottom's finest. One of the first things that came to mind when I started making this video was the episode The Smoking Peanut. The cops play a significant role in the episode as they are investigating what made Clamu so upset. For one of the first times in the show, we get a real good idea of how incompetent the police are. At the end of the episode, the police come to SpongeBob's house to question him. When they are done, it seems like they are about to arrest him, but instead they arrest Patrick, who was trying to investigate the incident himself. Of course, they had no evidence that Patrick was the culprit other than the fact that he was at the scene, but so was SpongeBob. And SpongeBob, was clearly very nervous as he was talking to the cops, which should have been a signal that he was hiding something. But he wasn't even trying to hide it. He answered all their questions honestly, growing more distressed with each one as he anticipated going to jail. The fact that the cops didn't pick up on this is pretty damning if you ask me. But what makes this whole incident way worse is the fact that neither SpongeBob nor Patrick were the real criminal. As it turns out, Clamu was actually upset not because of the peanut, but because Mr. Krabs stole her pearl. And who discovers this? Was it by chance the Bikini Bottom Police Department? No, it was a random zoo employee. At this point, we are just scratching the surface. In the episode Party Pooper Pants, SpongeBob is arrested. At first, it seems like he was being arrested for trying to break into his own home. This would at least be a justifiable mistake if the police really didn't know he lived there and he couldn't provide any proof. But first of all, there's only one person who lives in a pineapple under the sea, and he's kind of famous for it. Second of all, breaking into his house isn't even the reason the cops gave for arresting him. Instead, the cops arrested him for not inviting them to his party. That is a blatant abuse of power, while also demonstrating extreme negligence, as the police nearly let him go after he told them he lived there. But they didn't question him further on that, nor did they ask for proof of residency. For all they know, he could have been lying, and they would have just let him go, just like that. Next, I want to briefly talk about Sandy Cheeks. Like most of Bikini Bottom's most famous residents, she also has a history with the police. In the episode Someone's in the Kitchen with Sandy, she is taken into custody for public nudity. There are a number of things wrong with this. First of all, Sandy is still wearing her underwear in the episode. You could argue that she is still being indecent in public, but Sandy is frequently seen wearing nothing but her bikini and air helmet in public. Furthermore, other characters on the show are seen in public dressed the same way without getting arrested. Similarly, some of the characters on the show are frequently, if not always, just straight up naked, and they are never arrested for it. Plankton, for example, always naked. Every time he's in public, he's completely exposed, but no one, including the cops, ever bats an eye at that. Perhaps it is because he's so small, but that explanation does not make sense for other characters, like Squidward. Squidward is rarely naked, but typically he only wears a shirt exposing his lower half for all to see. I'm pretty sure not wearing pants in public would be enough to qualify for public indecency, even if you are wearing a shirt. In the episode The Algae's Always Greener, Mr. Krabs raids the Krusty Krab, and like Plankton, he's naked. I assume this is meant to be a reference to the fact that Plankton is always naked when he's trying to steal the formula, especially since Plankton wears Mr. Krabs' typical outfit in the episode. Obviously, Eugene is a regular-sized character, and everyone can see him in his full glory, and yet the police are nowhere to be seen.
But the worst part of it is... Good grief, he's naked!
And keep in mind, I'm just talking about the fact that he's naked. I didn't even mention how he was trying to steal the Krabby Patty's secret formula. So that is a double case of negligence for the cops of Bikini Bottom. So far, we've only really talked about what the police of Bikini Bottom have done, but what they haven't done is even more important to talk about. You see, Bikini Bottom is full of criminals, from Man Ray and the Dirty Bubble to Plankton and Mr. Krabs. Honestly, Bikini Bottom's supervillains don't really bother anyone that often, but when they do, even then the police are rarely involved. It's usually Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy who step in, often with the help from SpongeBob and Patrick. Although that could be seen as an indictment against the police department in its own right. But the supervillains aren't really the focus of this section of the video. Instead, I want to focus on Plankton and Mr. Krabs. Plankton's shenanigans are perhaps the most obvious things we can point to as examples of negligence and incompetence from the Bikini Bottom Police Department. There are at least 3 or 4 episodes every season where he tries to steal the formula, which I'm assuming is a crime in Bikini Bottom, since attempted robbery is a crime in real life, and that's not exactly a small crime either. Just because he isn't successful doesn't mean he doesn't deserve punishment for it. And his efforts only become more persistent in the later seasons as he ramps up his efforts from 3 or 4 attempts per season pre-movie to 8 or 9, if not more, per season post-movie. How often do we actually see Plankton get arrested for these attempted robberies? We see him get taken away in a tiny police van at the end of the Spongebob movie, But aside from that, we rarely see him face real consequences for his plots. We do see him get arrested in a few episodes, including Goo Goo Gas, Jailbreak, Krabby Road, and Call the Cops, but this is just a small sample of the times he tried to steal the formula. So what happened the rest of the time?
Nothing.
And while stealing the formula might be Plankton's main shtick, there are plenty of other instances of him being a criminal that go unpunished. For example, in the episode Wishing You Well, he wishes to be giant so he can crush his enemies. After his wish comes true, he goes around Bikini Bottom toppling buildings just for fun. That's what I like to call destruction of property. The same thing happens in the episode Enemies-in-Law, where his giant robot destroyed a large section of Bikini Bottom, in addition to kidnapping Mr. Krabs' mother. But while Plankton may be Bikini Bottom's biggest, or rather, smallest criminal, he is far from the worst character on the show when it comes into conflicts with the law. That honor goes to Eugene Harold Krabs. Mr. Krabs is not portrayed as a criminal the same way Plankton is. He is far more sophisticated and nuanced. Most of the time, he is not blatantly participating in criminal activity, although sometimes he is, and I will get into that later. But most of the time, Mr. Krabs is simply committing crimes through neglect and greed, which is kind of ironic since those are the exact same reasons I'm calling out the Bikini Bottom Police. Let's start with his long history of workers' rights violations. In the episode Graveyard Shift, he opens the Krusty Krab 24 hours a day, forcing SpongeBob and Patrick to work there perpetually. Now, every country and state has their own labor laws, so we can't say for sure what they look like in Bikini Bottom, but let's just use my home state of California as an example. In California, workers cannot work more than 8 hours a day or 40 hours a week without being given overtime pay, which is 1.5 times their normal salary. Even if we assume Bikini Bottom's labor laws are far more relaxed, surely there must be a cutoff at some point, right? Even if we double those numbers to 16 hours a day and 80 hours a week, that would still leave 64 hours a week where SpongeBob and Squidward would be getting 1.5 times their normal pay, factoring in the fact that the restaurant is not open on Sundays. Granted, throughout most of the show, the Krusty Krab is not open 24 hours a day. According to the Nickelodeon fandom website, the restaurant is open from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. on Friday and Saturday, and 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. for whatever reason on Tuesday. With it being closed on Sunday, that is a total of 82 hours per week it is in operation. And that does not include time spent before and after doors close, where SpongeBob and Squidward would have to come in to prep for the day and clean up. So with those two being Eugene's only employees, even with our ridiculous 80-hour per week cutoff for overtime pay, he would still have to pay SpongeBob and Squidward time and a half for at least a few hours every week. And as we know, that is not something Mr. Krabs would ever do.
Patrick, look at this thing. Pretty cool, huh?
That looks like the toilet plunger I threw out yesterday.
That ain't no toilet plunger. This here's an antique. It's a 17th century soup ladle. See?
Man, was I using mine wrong. How much?
$5.
I've only got 7.
Deal.
Patrick Star, you are one smart shopper.
In my notes for this video, I had 2 sections under Mr. Krabs, one for wage theft and another for workers' rights violations, but honestly, it's kind of hard to discuss one without the other. We've already touched on both, with the Krusty Krab being open 24 hours a day, firmly falling into both categories, as forcing Squidward and SpongeBob to work that long is definitely a violation of their rights, but they definitely are not getting compensated properly at the same time. But honestly, this is just the tip of the iceberg for Mr. Krabs. Let us next talk about his unsanitary business practices. In the episode Born Again Krabs, he tries to sell a Krabby Patty that had been rotting on the floor under the grease traps for who knows how long. It was green, covered in mold, and clearly unsafe to eat. But Mr. Krabs, being the greedy asshole he is, tries to push it on his customers anyways. In fact, he won't sell a regular patty until the Foggy Patty, as it is apparently known, is sold. As a result, customers stop coming to the Krusty Krab, and rightfully so. But does Mr. Krabs ever face any legal consequences for knowingly attempting to serve rotten food?
No.
In the episode Greasy Buffoons, Mr. Krabs has SpongeBob clean out a giant grease trap. This is also after hours, so we are venturing back into workers' rights violations here, but that isn't even the point of me bringing this up. Instead, I brought it up because after they clean out the trap, Mr. Krabs dumps the grease behind the chum bucket. I'm pretty sure that is illegal. Making matters worse, it kicks off this war between him and Plankton where they compete to see who can serve the worst food to their customers. Assuming Bikini Bottom has some kind of consumer protection laws in place, this would definitely be illegal too. You can't just serve pure grease to customers and expect to get away with it. And in a rare instance of sanity, Eugene actually does face consequences for his actions in this episode. SpongeBob calls the health inspector, who comes and orders both restaurants to be shut down until the grease is removed from the area. However, both Mr. Krabs and Plankton basically get away with it anyway, as SpongeBob takes it upon himself to clean up the mess. Also, it should be noted that the restaurants were not shut down because they were serving trash to their customers, it was just because of the mess it caused. So it just feels to me like Mr. Krabs got off really lightly on this one. One time he did not get off so lightly came in the episode Band in Bikini Bottom. Mrs. Gristlepuss visits the Krusty Krab and promptly has it shut down because SpongeBob was having too much fun. Ironically, Mr. Krabs didn't really do anything that deserved to get the Krusty Krab closed, but because Mrs. Gristlepuss's husband is the chief of police, she had the power to do that. Obviously, this is a pretty blatant example of corruption within the Bikini Bottom police force. But there are still plenty more crimes Mr. Krabs has committed that we haven't talked about yet. First, I want to talk about the episode Clams, where he kidnaps Squidward and SpongeBob, forcing them to stay on a clamming trip until he gets his $1 millionth back. This is one of his more unhinged moments as he throws food overboard and eventually ties up his employees to use as bait for the giant clam that ate his dollar. This one kind of just falls under general criminal activity. SpongeBob and Squidward aren't really acting as his employees, so it doesn't necessarily fall under workers' rights violations, but obviously, you can't be kidnapping people. So where was the Bikini Bottom Police Department when SpongeBob and Squidward needed them? Was Eugene arrested for kidnapping when they returned from the fishing trip? Perhaps one of the very worst episodes for the police department is the Nasty Patty. The level of ignorance and incompetence on display in this episode is outright ludicrous. First, the police see Mr. Krabs and SpongeBob alone in the middle of nowhere with a shovel on a rainy night. That's red flag number 1. Second, SpongeBob takes a suspiciously long amount of time putting the shovel in the trunk when the police offer to give them a ride back to the Krusty Krab. Red flag number 2. Third, SpongeBob acts extremely nervous and weird on the car ride back to the Krusty Krab. Red flag number 3. Then he walks into the restaurant with something suspiciously body-shaped hidden under his hat. Red flag number 4. When the cops request ice for their soda, Mr. Krabs claims there is no ice, famously saying that ice is just a myth. That's red flag number 5. Finally, Mr. Krabs and SpongeBob straight up admit to killing the health inspector. That isn't even a red flag at that point, that's just a confession. But when the health inspector wakes up and tries to explain the situation, the cops think he is a zombie and repeatedly hit him on the head. I mean, this has really just got to be satire, right? But what do you think? Is the Bikini Bottom Police Department corrupt? Is there anything that I missed in this video? Please let me know your thoughts in the comment section. If you liked the video, I will put another one on screen for you to watch now. But with that being said, that is the end of this one. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. And as always, never forget to be yourself.